Hi guys, and welcome to Calm Night Radio Channel. Tonight we walk into an English Atlantic world where the rules are not settled, the labels are not fixed, and one human life can change with a signature, a sermon, a harvest, or a lie. You arrive where salt hangs in the air, wet timber creaks underfoot, and the shoreline looks less like a border than a question. Who is free here? Really? Who belongs? Who can be bought? And who can somehow bargain? The answer, in 1650, is not yet the iron cage it will become, and that uncertainty makes everything more unsettling. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while you are here, comment with your location and your local time. Now, dim the lights and let yourself drift toward a rough, windy edge of early America, where black men, women, and children step into colonial life carrying memory, skill, fear, and a stubborn sense that they are still fully human. Even when the world around them is trying very hard to disagree, you begin at the water. That is where so much of this life starts. The shore smells of tar, mud, fish, damp rope, and wood smoke. Small boats knock against one another with hollow thuds. The tide slides in and out with patient indifference, as if it has seen too many frightened faces to be impressed by another. You stand in a colonial port of the English world, perhaps Virginia, perhaps Maryland, perhaps somewhere smaller and more uncertain, and you see a place that is not grand at all. It is muddy. It is improvised. It is full of people trying to become richer than they were yesterday. In 1650, black Americans are already present in the English colonies, but their place is not yet identical everywhere. That matters. You do not enter a system that is neat, stable, or politely labelled. You enter confusion. Some black people are clearly enslaved for life. Some seem to be bound for a term, closer to indentured servants in practice, though never treated quite the same. Some are free. A few own land, a few go to court, a few manage to build households of their own. This is the troubling thing, the lines exist, but they wobble. You can almost hear the colony thinking out loud. A planter wants labour, a merchant wants profit, a governor wants order, a minister wants souls, a clerk wants categories. Everyone keeps sorting human beings into boxes, and the boxes do not quite hold. So daily life for black people in 1650 exists inside that unstable moment, between old fluidity and newer cruelty, between possibility and danger. You feel the danger first. It sits in the body. It is the way strangers look at you and try to place you. It is the pause before someone answers a question. It is the way a man with authority asks who owns your labour, as if your time could hang from his belt beside a knife. Life depends on paperwork that can be missing, vague, forged, or ignored. A baptism might help one person argue for better treatment. It might do nothing for another. A contract might promise years and then vanish into smoke, mud, or deliberate amnesia. A court might hear you. It might laugh. Sleep comes lightly here. The houses are rough, often built fast, patched often, and never as dry as anyone wishes. At night you hear wind moving through cracks in the boards. You smell rushes, damp clothes, ash, and bodies tired enough to sleep anywhere. Mosquitoes whine. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs with a deep, wet force that does not sound promising. The colony is young, but already full of graves. Disease is one of the rulers here, and it does not care about race, though race certainly shapes who gets rest, food, treatment, and mercy. For black newcomers, whether African-born or colonial-born, the shock is not only physical, it is sensory, spiritual, and social. The landscape feels both open and fenced. Forests stretch beyond sight, thick and alive with birds, insects, hidden creeks, and the presence of indigenous communities who know this land far better than the anxious English ever will. Yet inside the settlement, life narrows quickly. Work sites, sleeping quarters, kitchens, yards, and fields define the day. You're watched, counted, assigned. Still, you are not empty on arrival. That matters too. Black Americans in 1650 do not enter the scene as blank victims drifting through someone else's story. Many come with farming knowledge, language skills, metalworking experience, religious memory, healing practices, and habits of trade. Some know rice, some cattle, some boat work, some household labour. Some know how to read social danger in a room faster than any Englishman can read a ledger. Many have already survived violence, forced movement, and profound loss. By the time you meet them in a colony, endurance is not a theory. It is a practiced art. You see that art in small things. A woman ties cloth in a way learned long before this shore. A man shapes a tool handle to fit the palm just right. Someone seasons food with a preference that came from another coast, another childhood. Someone hums under their breath while carrying water. These details are easy for a powerful society to dismiss. They are not small to the people living them. They are fragments of selfhood, held quietly but firmly. The English, of course, notice different things. They notice labour value. They notice skin colour. They notice whether a person can be taxed, punished, bought, or inherited. Yet in 1650, even English authorities have not perfectly agreed on what black status means. Historians still argue whether colonial leaders recognised from the start that they were creating a permanent racial slave system, or whether they stumbled toward it through profit, panic, and habit. That uncertainty in scholarship mirrors the uncertainty people lived every day. So you walk through a world of inconsistent rules. One county may tolerate a free black landholder, another may harass him relentlessly. One household may allow a black servant or labourer to marry, trade a little, or keep a garden patch. Another may deny every scrap of independence. A child of African descent may be baptised in one parish, and still treated as movable property in another. The colony is full of half-decisions, local customs, and men with too much power over other people's mornings. Mornings begin early. Before sunrise, the air can be cool and wet against your skin. Mist hovers low over the ground. Then the workday rises with the light. Fires are stirred, porridge thickens, tools are gathered. Animals call, orders begin. A person's status becomes visible in how the day is commanded, who gives instruction, who receives it, who eats first, who pauses, who carries, who waits. These things tell a story long before any law book does. For many black people, the earliest English colonial decades mean labour in tobacco country. Tobacco is greedy. It demands clearing, planting, weeding, topping, cutting, curing, packing, hauling. The smell of it can cling to skin and cloth. Your hands sting from the work. Your back aches. Dirt gathers under your nails and in the seams of your palms. Tobacco wealth helps build the colonies, which is a polished way of saying that human bodies are burned up so someone else can purchase silver, silk, and more land. And yet, this is not only a plantation world in the later massive sense many people imagine. In 1650, many holdings are smaller. Labour can happen in tight, intimate settings where the distance between worker and master is physically small and emotionally enormous. You cook close enough to hear private arguments. You sleep near enough to hear the baby cry, the couple quarrel, the floorboards answer every step. A black worker might chop wood beside a white indentured servant, haul water with an indigenous captive, and receive orders from an English mistress who claims godliness while counting every spoon. It is a crowded little world. Sometimes that closeness creates fragile openings. A person may learn English more quickly. A person may pick up legal language, Christian formulas, agricultural methods, and bits of local gossip that later become useful. A few black men in the mid-17th century managed to obtain freedom, complete terms of service, or secure property rights in ways that become much rarer later. One quirky detail from this period is that some early court records show black individuals using the colonial legal system with surprising boldness, suing for wages, service terms, or recognition. Imagine that for a moment, a society trying to narrow your existence, and you arrive at its own bench and ask it to state the rules plainly. Slightly inconvenient for the empire, really, but every opening comes with risk. To argue in court, you need witnesses, time, luck, and a community willing to say what they know. To claim freedom, you need proof in a place where paper molds, names shift spelling, and powerful men forget things very selectively. A planter may die, and his widow may honour an agreement, or she may not. A son may inherit people as assets and decide that previous kindness was a family error best corrected. Women face particular instability. A black woman's labour is demanded in fields, kitchens, dairies, washyards, and birthing rooms. Her body is read as productive in every possible sense, which is a cold colonial way of saying that her work and childbearing can both be exploited. Yet women also become culture bearers in profound ways. Through food, childcare, speech patterns, remedies, stories, and forms of comfort, they help create continuity where the colony offers none. The smell of stew thickening over a fire, the feel of a child's hair being combed, the murmur of a remembered phrase from an older language, these can hold a life together at the seams. Children experience this world with brutal speed. They learn quickly who can strike them, who might protect them, and which spaces are safe for play. Childhood exists, but it is shortened by labour, loss, and hierarchy. Some children of African descent are born into the colonies and know no other home. That fact matters. By 1650, black life in English America is not only imported, it is being rooted, however painfully, in local soil. You sense roots forming everywhere. Not safe roots, not easy ones, but real ones. A path worn between quarters and kitchen, a preferred place by the fire, seeds tucked aside, friendships built in whispers, shared laughter after dark when someone mocks a pompous master with dangerous accuracy, a remembered song adjusted to a new rhythm, a burial done as carefully as circumstances allow. These are the beginnings of community, and community is never a trivial thing. It is a defence against being reduced to labour alone. Religion moves through this world in awkward ways. English Christians often speak grandly about salvation, while behaving with astonishing flexibility whenever profit is involved. Some colonists worry that baptizing Africans may complicate ownership, though practice varies. Others welcome conversion, at least in theory. For black people, spiritual life can include Christian teaching, African religious memory, or mixtures the records barely catch. The archive loves official voices. It is much worse at preserving quiet belief, and quiet belief is often where dignity survives. So what is life actually like for black Americans in 1650? It is not one thing. It is arrival mixed with adaptation. It is fear mixed with skill. It is legal ambiguity wrapped around hard labour. It is a world where some doors remain barely open, even as powerful hands are already moving to shut them. You live with the constant possibility that tomorrow's rule will be worse than today's custom. You also live with the equally stubborn fact that people continue to build meaning anyway. The colony would prefer a simpler story. Buyer and bought, master and servant, Christian and heathen, free and unfree. But human lives rarely stay in the tidy shapes demanded by paperwork. In the damp morning, in the smoke of evening, in the sting of work and the relief of a shared glance. Black Americans in 1650 are already making lives that exceed the categories pressed upon them, and that may be the most important truth of all. They are not waiting to become fully human in the eyes of the colony. They already are. The tragedy is that the colony knows it, profits from it, and keeps searching for ways to deny it. You move inland and discover that the colony loves categories almost as much as it loves tobacco. It sorts land, animals, tools, barrels, servants, wives, children, debts, sins, and souls. It tries to sort people with the same hungry neatness. Yet in 1650 the categories for black life in English America still slide around like wet boards in a storm. Nothing feels stable. A man may be called servant in one record and something harsher in another. A woman may be treated like a household labourer one day and like inherited property the next. A child may be baptised with solemn ceremony and still grow up under the shadow of ownership. The officials write their lists, but real life keeps smudging the ink. You feel this uncertainty in the way people speak. Questions come quickly. Are you bound for years or for life? Were you born in the colony or taken across the ocean? Were your parents Christians? Can you testify? Can you own anything? Can you marry? Can you be punished like a servant, sold like livestock, or taxed like a labourer? Each answer changes the next. The trouble is that the answers are not agreed upon by everyone holding power. The colony behaves like a place making itself up as it goes, and black people are forced to live inside that experiment. The air inland is different from the shore. The smell of salt fades. You notice clay, leaf mould, cut wood, trampled grass, animal pens, smoke from green timber, and the bitter sweetness of curing tobacco. Paths are narrow and rutted. Trees loom everywhere, their bark dark with damp. Cabins appear in scattered clusters, not tidy rows. A settlement can feel more like a collection of anxious clearings than a proper town. This is not a polished empire. It is a rough landscape where English ambition has outrun English order. That roughness matters. Later generations imagine slavery as a machine with iron rules, as if someone built it all at once. In 1650, the machine is still being assembled from greed, fear, and local convenience. Black life exists in the seams. Some men of African descent finish terms of service and become legally free. Some acquire small plots of land, livestock, or tools. Some form households that their neighbours grudgingly recognise. Others find that every claim to liberty can vanish when a powerful planter decides that custom means whatever helps him most. This is why daily life feels unstable even in ordinary moments. You wake not only to labour, but also to the possibility that the terms of your existence may be redefined around breakfast. Breakfast itself is rarely impressive. The bowl is rough in your hand. The spoon may be wooden, worn smooth by many mouths. You taste cornmeal, porridge, perhaps a little milk, perhaps none. Smoke from the hearth settles into your clothes. Ash drifts softly when someone stirs the coals. There is a child whining from hunger, a dog circling hopefully, a woman blowing on a spoonful before handing it over. Life is built from these plain textures. Even legal uncertainty has to share space with the ache of cold fingers and the smell of wet wool drying too slowly. In this world, white indentured servants and black labourers sometimes work side by side. That closeness can confuse people who expect a fully formed racial order. A white servant may sleep on a pallet not much better than yours, eat food scarcely richer, and fear the lash with familiar intensity. Yet sameness only goes so far. The colony is already learning to distinguish suffering by colour. White servants, however abused, often remain imaginable as future neighbours, tenants, husbands, militiamen, or voters. Black workers, even when technically under terms, are increasingly imagined as permanent outsiders to those rights. That difference settles in quietly, then hardens. You hear it in the joking tone of masters who treat black labour as naturally endless. You see it in punishments that stretch beyond what a term servant should face. You notice it in how children absorb the lesson. A white child raised in a planter household may grow up seeing a black adult ordered struck or transferred, and learn that authority over black bodies feels normal. The lesson enters the colony long before formal law has finished dressing it in official language. Still, the uncertainty opens peculiar spaces. A black man who knows how to handle livestock, repair tools, bargain shrewdly, or speak enough English to navigate contracts may carve out a fragile status. A widow needing labour might negotiate rather than dominate, at least for a season. A church might acknowledge one person's membership while ignoring the implications. A county court may recognise service completed, land purchased, or debt owed. These moments do not make the society fair. They reveal that it is still inconsistent. Inconsistency can be cruel, but it can also leave gaps where a determined person squeezes through. Some of the strangest details of the period come from courtrooms. Colonial records occasionally preserve black voices in broken fragments, often because someone was disputing labour, status, or payment. A man appears because he says he has served long enough. A woman is named in an estate inventory, and then turns up in a dispute that suggests her condition was not as straightforward as the heirs hoped. The paper trail is thin, but it hints at a world in which black people are not simply silent objects. They argue, negotiate, witness, petition, marry, work for wages at times, and defend claims when possible. The colony tries to flatten them into property. Real life keeps refusing to lie still. Historians still debate how much early English colonists consciously intended a rigid racial slave system by mid-century. Some scholars emphasise the gradual shift from mixed labour arrangements toward hereditary slavery. Others argue that English attitudes toward Africans were harsh and exploitative from the beginning, even when the paperwork remained inconsistent. The disagreement matters because it shapes how you understand 1650. You're not standing in innocence before a fall. You're standing in a brutal world whose rules have not finished hardening. That makes small interactions feel tense. When two men meet at a gate, status hangs in the pause before either speaks. When a woman enters a kitchen, the distribution of tasks tells you who commands and who obeys. When labourers gather at dusk, the tone of their conversation depends on who is near enough to listen. Even laughter has to measure the room. Humour survives. Though people tease, mimic, roll eyes, and trade sly observations. Gentle sarcasm, one suspects, is among the most durable human technologies. It costs little and preserves a shred of dignity. You notice clothing too. It tells its own uncertain story. Coarse linen scratches the skin. Wool feels heavy when damp. Shirts are patched and repatched until the cloth resembles a map of previous emergencies. Shoes crack, split, or vanish entirely in muddy months. A free black landholder, where such a person exists, may dress a little better than a bound labourer, though not lavishly. An enslaved child may wear garments handed down, until shape and ownership both look doubtful. Fabric in the colonies is precious. Cloth is labour, trade, weather protection, and social signal all at once. The same goes for names. Naming carries deep meaning in a place obsessed with ownership. Some Africans retain names from home, though English mouths often twist the sounds. Others receive Christian names from masters, clergy, or scribes, who rarely ask what the person wishes to be called. Some live with both, a public name for the record and a private identity carried among trusted people. That dual naming can become a kind of shield. One name faces power, another keeps memory alive. The records do not always show the difference, but daily life surely felt it. Marriage exists in this uncertain world, though not on equal terms. A free black man and black woman under service may struggle to keep a household together. A couple may be recognised by neighbours without full legal protection. A union may depend more on community acknowledgement than on the state. English law loves ceremony when ceremony serves property. It becomes strangely vague when the people involved are inconvenient to its hierarchy. Even so, people pair off, build homes, raise children, and create kin networks that matter deeply whether or not the authorities approve. Children learn category by watching adults flinch. They see who steps aside on a path. They hear who is called by surname and who is not. They notice who may hold a musket, who may carry a Bible openly, who may speak in court, who may sit at table, and who is expected to stand. These lessons are rarely delivered as speeches. They arrive through posture, tone, habit, and repetition. The colony teaches race in daily gestures long before a child can define the word, yet children also complicate the very system trying to contain them. Mixed ancestry appears in the records and in the settlements themselves. English men exploit black women. Children are born into tangled legal and social conditions. Colonial authorities then face the uncomfortable problem of deciding which side of the hierarchy such children belong on. Their solutions grow steadily more ruthless over time. In 1650, the answers are still less fixed, which means families live under constant pressure from rumour, inheritance disputes, and local prejudice. A quirky but revealing detail from early colonial life is how much depended on neighbours simply knowing your story. In a thinly settled world, formal bureaucracy is weaker than gossip with good memory. Who remembers when you arrived? Who recalls your master promising freedom? Who saw you working for wages? Who can swear that your child was born after a certain marriage or baptism? A person's fate may rest on whether three muddy men in a county court happen to believe the same tale. It is not exactly the image of majestic English justice that the Empire might prefer. The atmosphere of all this is exhausting. Imagine living where every relationship contains a calculation. A friendly exchange with a neighbour might matter later in court. A quarrel with a planter might shadow your status for years. A minister's opinion could help or harm. A written line in a ledger might change your future. You would learn caution the way other people learn weather. You would read faces, tones, silences, and opportunities with astonishing speed. That skill is part of daily survival. Night brings no final certainty. Darkness settles thickly in the woods. Frogs call from wet places. Insects pulse in the air. Smoke from the fire clings to your blanket and hair. You hear low voices, perhaps prayer, perhaps gossip, perhaps a mother coaxing a child towards sleep. The body is tired, but the mind still turns. Freedom might be possible for some. Service might end for some. Ownership might deepen for many more. The colony has not fully decided what black life is supposed to be, and that indecision does not feel hopeful so much as dangerous. So life in 1650 rests inside a strange and unsettling middle ground. You're seen, counted, and used, but not yet always placed under one universal rule. Some people exploit the ambiguity, some suffer because of it. Most do both, depending on the day. The English colonies are constructing a racial order in plain sight, but the boards are still being nailed together. Black Americans live within that half-built structure, navigating spaces where humanity is obvious. Rights are fragile, and status can shift with terrifying speed. The categories may wobble, but the pressure is real. The world may be unfinished, but it is already sharp. And in that sharpness, people still manage to think, choose, love, bargain, pray, resist, and continue. That continuation is not a minor detail. It is the centre of the story. The day begins in darkness, which feels a little unfair, though the colony is not known for fairness. You wake before the sky changes colour. The air is cool and wet against your face. Your blanket smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and old straw. Somewhere nearby, a rooster makes an argument with the dawn. A pot lid rattles. A child stirs. Someone coughs into the thin wall. Then feet touch the floor, and work begins before morning has fully agreed to arrive. This is what labour feels like in 1650. It is constant. It comes early. It settles into your bones and stays there. For black Americans, daily work depends on where you live. Who claims authority over you, and what season has taken hold? There is no single task that defines every life. Some people spend long days in tobacco fields, Some cook, wash, mend, and carry in English households. Some cut timber, some handle livestock. Some work on docks, in boats, near storehouses, or around workshops where iron, leather, and wood are shaped into useful things. The labour changes. The demand does not. You feel the rhythm first in your hands. Hands hold the hoe handle, rough and splintered in places. Hands lift damp bundles. Hands knead coarse dough, wring cloth, stir kettles, scrub bowls, pull weeds, carry water, twist rope, cut fodder, and soothe crying children while some other task still waits impatiently. Fingertips crack in cold weather, palms harden, nails split. Skin becomes a record of the season. You do not need a diary when your knuckles already know the month. In tobacco country, work follows the plant's appetite. Tobacco behaves like a needy prince who never stops asking for service. Fields must be cleared, often with exhausting force. Roots are stubborn, stumps resist, branches snag at sleeves and skin. New ground smells rich and raw once the earth is opened, full of clay, damp leaves, and the sharp scent of cut wood. Then come planting, weeding, and tending. The rows stretch out in patient lines. You bend, straighten, bend again. Hours pass like this. Then the sun climbs. By midday, heat presses down on your shoulders and neck. Sweat runs into your eyes. Your shirt clings to your back. Gnats hover around your face with rude determination. The smell of crushed green leaves mixes with soil, body heat, and the faint smoke drifting from distant hearths. The field hums with insects and quiet misery. No one needs to describe fatigue. It is already present, walking beside you like a very loyal companion. Tobacco requires close attention. Leaves must be watched, trimmed, and handled carefully. The work is not simply brute force, though there is plenty of that too. It demands judgment. You need to know when the plants are thriving, when they are failing, when worms are attacking, when weather has turned unhelpful, and when a careless hand will cost money for the person who owns the crop. This is one of the strange truths of colonial labour. Black workers are often treated as if they are disposable, while their skill is relied upon every single day. The colony insults intelligence and depends on it at the same time. That contradiction appears everywhere. In a kitchen, a black woman may be expected to prepare meals for a household with almost no waste, because food stores matter and supplies can vanish quickly. She must know how long to boil, when to salt, what to save, what to stretch, what to skim, and how to make a meal look respectable to people who rarely thank her. She feels the heat of the hearth on her cheeks and forearms. Her hair picks up the scent of onions, ash, fat, and damp firewood, grease spits. Iron pots groan softly when moved. The room is warm in winter, punishing in summer, and busy in every season. Kitchen labour is never just cooking. There is fetching water, splitting kindling, cleaning fish, plucking fowl, grinding meal, washing trenchers, scouring kettles, and carrying scraps to animals. There is laundry too, which sounds almost harmless until you imagine endless hauling, soaking, scrubbing, boiling, wringing, lifting, and hanging. Wet cloth is heavy. Soap can sting cracked skin. Steam fogs the face. Backs protest. Arms burn. A colony produces dirty linen with astonishing efficiency. Field labour and household labour are often treated as separate worlds, but they overlap more than people think. On small holdings, one person may move from field to yard, from yard to kitchen, from kitchen to livestock pen, from pen to storehouse, all in a single day. The tasks blur together. You weed at sunrise, stir a kettle at noon, and mend a fence before dusk. There is no precious little bell to declare that one occupation has ended and another may politely begin. Labour just changes shape. Men, women, and children all work, though not always in identical ways. Children frighten birds from fields, carry messages, gather kindling, fetch water, mind babies, and learn tasks by watching adults move quickly. A child's work may look light to someone far away. It does not feel light when your legs are tired. Your stomach is empty again, and every mistake brings harsh words. Childhood in the colonies often smells like smoke, mud, and responsibility. There are also animals to manage. Cows do not milk themselves. Pigs test fences with malicious curiosity. Chickens scatter in all directions the moment someone needs them to behave. Horses require brushing, feeding, and watchful handling. Livestock work brings its own sounds and textures. Hooves strike packed ground. A bucket knocks against a fence post. Hay scratches the wrists. The barn carries a thick smell of dung, leather, feed, and warm animal breath. To care for animals is yet another form of labour that rarely ends cleanly. Near ports and rivers, work shifts again. Water opens other demands. Barrels are rolled, loaded, and stacked. Cargo must be lifted without damage. Boats need cleaning, patching, and guiding. Rope burns the palm if held carelessly. Wet planks are slippery underfoot. The river smells of mud, fish, reeds, tar, and tide. Men working near the water learn balance, timing, and patience. They also learn that trade enriches distant people while leaving labourers sore, hungry, and one bad step away from injury. A quirky detail from colonial work life is how much practical knowledge passed quietly from person to person, without any grand record of it. A method for preserving food. A way to sharpen a blade faster. A trick for soothing a feverish child. A better knot. A stronger basket weave. A planting habit suited to local soil. The archives are full of men signing papers. Daily survival often depends on someone else showing you how to angle a tool or read a sky. Such knowledge rarely appears in elegant handwriting, though it may be the reason a household survives winter. You also notice that labour is timed by nature rather than by clocks. The colony has church bells in some places and timepieces in a few hands, but the body mostly follows light, weather, and season. You work when dawn allows it. You race storms. You hurry at harvest. You repair during quieter spells. Rain changes everything. Wet ground sucks at shoes and hems. Cold stiffens fingers. Summer heat slows breath. Autumn brings a sharper smell to the air, mixed with drying leaves and smoke from heavier fires. Winter labour is different, not absent. Fences still break. Water still needs carrying. Meals still need making. Wood, always wood, must be cut and stacked. Rest exists, but not generously. There may be a brief pause to swallow food, corn cakes, pottage, salted meat when available, a few bites taken standing, water dipped from a bucket. The meal is practical rather than joyful, though people still manage moments of fellowship, a shared glance, a muttered joke, someone rolling their eyes at a master's fussiness. Human beings are stubbornly social, even under pressure. Humour survives where comfort does not. White indentured servants often labour beside black workers, especially in these earlier colonial decades. They sweat in the same fields, curse the same weather, and receive similar orders in the same sharp tone. Yet equal exhaustion does not mean equal status. A white servant may imagine a future beyond service, however uncertain. A black worker, even if technically serving a term, stands much closer to permanent exploitation in the colony's imagination. That difference can shape everything from punishment to hope. Hope, inconveniently, is another kind of labour. Punishment shadows the workday. It may be threatened more often than used, but threat itself alters the body. You move faster when someone is watching with a switch or a cane. You speak more carefully. You make yourself smaller in moments when anger would be justified. The colony demands effort and obedience together. A person who is skilled but not submissive can be seen as dangerous. A person who is obedient but exhausted can still be called lazy. The judgment is rigged from the start. Historians still dispute exactly how labour systems in the English colonies shifted from mixed forms of servitude into more rigid racial slavery at different local speeds. What seems clear is that by 1650, black labour is already being valued as more controllable, more permanent, and more inheritable by many colonists. You can sense this in how work is assigned. Black bodies are increasingly imagined not simply as useful for a season, but as foundations for wealth over generations. It is a chilling development, especially because it appears first in ordinary routines. Routine can hide cruelty very well. A woman lifting kettles each morning. A man topping tobacco in the same field each week. A child sent for water again and again, from a distance. These look like chores. Up close, they reveal a society learning to build prosperity out of unequal exhaustion. The work is not memorable to the people who profit from it because it happens every day. To the labourer, that is exactly the point. Every day. And yet, skill creates small zones of pride, a straight row in the field, a well-cured batch of leaves, bread that rises properly, linen scrubbed clean, a fence repaired so neatly that even the grumbling overseer has nothing useful to say. Pride does not erase coercion, but it can protect the self from total humiliation. You may be forced to work, but the quality of your work can still belong partly to you. There is dignity in competence, even when others try to claim the result. At dusk, the body changes temperature. The worst heat lifts. Shadows lengthen. Tools are gathered. Chickens fuss their way toward roosts. Smoke thickens from hearth fires. The evening air carries earth, supper, sweat, and the sweet fading scent of crushed plants. Your feet ache. Your shoulders feel packed with stones. Your hands pulse when finally emptied of tools. Work may slow, but it is not entirely ended. There is still mending, tending, feeding, cleaning, checking the fire, settling children, planning for tomorrow's demands. Night sounds softer, but the body remains loud to itself. A knee complains when bent. A blister rubs against rough cloth. A wrist throbs. You lie down and feel every hour that came before. This is what labour does in 1650. It shapes time, appetite, posture, and sleep. It decides what muscles grow hard and what hopes stay small. It teaches endurance, precision, caution, and the art of doing necessary things while tired beyond reason. So when you ask what life was actually like, the answer is not abstract. It feels like dirt under the nails, smoke in the hair, heat on the neck, and soreness carried into dreams. It sounds like hoes striking ground, kettles scraping hooks, children called to task, and river cargo thudding into place. It smells like tobacco leaf, boiling laundry, animal pens, wet wood, and porridge at dawn. It is labour from first light to near darkness, and then some more besides. The colony runs on that labour, quietly, greedily, completely. By now you know that survival has a texture. In 1650 it is rougher than most people like to imagine. It scratches, smokes, pinches, leaks and chills. Life is lived not only through laws and labour, but through the things that touch your skin each day. A shirt that never fully dries. A blanket that carries the smell of ash. A bowl with a crack near the rim. A floor that gives a little under your foot because the boards were cut fast and fitted badly. For black Americans in the English colonies, food, clothing, and shelter are not background details. They are the daily proof of where you stand in the world. You begin with the house, if house is the right word. Some dwellings are little more than hurried wooden structures thrown together with the colony's favourite building method, which is to say optimism mixed with damp lumber. The walls are thin. The roof may be thatched, boarded, or patched with whatever can be found before the next rain. Wind sneaks through seams. Smoke hangs low if the chimney draws poorly, which it often does because the colony is full of men who are very certain they can build anything, and less certain they actually can. You sleep in air that smells of soot, wet wood, sweat, old straw, and sometimes mould. The floor beneath you might be packed earth or rough planks. Either way, it is rarely kind. Earth floors stay cold and sometimes muddy near the doorway. Wooden floors creak, splinter, and let in drafts through the gaps. Insects consider every arrangement a personal invitation. Fleas, lice, mosquitoes, and other tiny colonial optimists share the room with confidence. At night you hear them, along with mice rustling in thatch or corners, and perhaps a soft curse from someone trying not to wake everyone else. Space is precious. A sleeping place may be no more than a pallet stuffed with straw, dried grass, or corn husks, spread on the floor or laid on a simple frame. The stuffing shifts and flattens. It pokes through thin ticking. Blankets are coarse and rarely plentiful. In cold weather, bodies curl tighter, sharing warmth where possible. In hot weather, the air inside can feel stale and heavy, touched by smoke, breath, and the faint sourness of damp cloth that never had a proper chance to air out. Privacy is a luxury so rare it almost sounds fictional. For some black labourers, especially on smaller holdings, sleeping quarters may be within or very near the household of the people who command them. That closeness does not bring comfort. It means your rest is always one voice away from interruption. A child cries. A mistress calls. A dog begins barking at nothing visible. Someone decides another bucket of water is needed. Someone remembers a chore at exactly the moment you hope to lie still. Sleep in the colony is not a peaceful ceremony. It is a truce. Yet even in harsh quarters, people arrange small signs of order. A peg driven into the wall to keep one treasured cloth away from the dirt. A folded rag used as a pillow cover. A basket tucked under the bed frame. A gourd vessel carefully placed where it will not be kicked over in the dark. These are modest acts, but they matter. Order is a kind of resistance when the world keeps trying to reduce you to mere function. Now you turn to clothing. Colonial clothing is practical in the least glamorous sense of the word. It protects the body just enough to send it back to work. Linen shirts are common, coarse, and irritating when wet. Wool garments warm the body in winter but feel heavy, itchy, and stubborn once they soak through. Breeches, shifts, aprons, caps, stockings, petticoats, jackets, and kerchiefs circulate through households according to need, rank, season, and whatever scraps remain usable. New clothing is rare for labouring people. More often, garments are repaired until the repairs themselves need repair. The cloth has a life of its own. You feel the scratch of seams under the arm. You notice patches of different weight and colour sewn onto older fabric. Elbows go shiny from wear. Knees thin, cuffs darken with use. Laces break. Buttons disappear. Shoes split at the sole or pinch when they dry too hard after rain. Bare feet toughen quickly where footwear is missing or saved for certain tasks. Mud presses between toes. Summer dust coats the skin. Winter ground bites back. A woman may receive a shift and petticoat so worn that the original shape is more a suggestion than a fact. A man may work in breeches patched at both knees, tied with cord because a fastening has failed. A child may wear a garment cut down from an adult's older clothing, sleeves rolled and hem uneven. The colony hates waste almost as much as it hates equality. Cloth is expensive, so fabric moves from master to servant, from adult to child, from presentable to rough, and finally from rough to rag. Rags matter too. They become bandages, cleaning cloths, swaddling pieces, strainers, and patches. Nothing is discarded lightly. A strip of worn linen may wipe a baby's face in the morning, polish a spoon at midday, and wrap a sore hand by nightfall. Material scarcity teaches creativity very quickly. It also means that personal possessions, however humble, carry weight. One extra kerchief, one better pair of stockings, one blanket not eaten entirely by damp, These are not small advantages when the weather turns hard. The smell of clothing tells its own story. Smoke settles into every fibre because nearly all warmth and cooking come from fire. Sweat clings to collars and underarms. Rainwater leaves a raw mineral scent. Wool picks up the odour of sheep, lanolin and damp storage. Linen, if washed and dried well, can smell almost clean in a bright, plain way, though that freshness vanishes the moment work begins again. Soap helps, when available, but soap is labour too. Ashes, animal fat, boiling, scrubbing, rinsing, wringing. Cleanliness in the colony is never effortless. Food enters this world as necessity first, pleasure second. What you eat depends on region, season, status, and luck. Though luck is not equally distributed, naturally, for many labouring people, meals centre on corn in one form or another. Cornmeal porridge, coarse bread, mush, cakes cooked on a griddle or near the fire. There may be peas, beans, turnips, cabbage or greens from garden patches. Salted meat appears when stores allow. Fish may be available near coasts or rivers. Milk, buttermilk, and cheese depend on livestock and household habits. The meal is often filling enough to continue work, though not rich enough to feel generous. Taste is blunt, but vivid. Salt stings the tongue in preserved meat. Cornmeal feels grainy and warm. Greens can be earthy, slightly bitter, softened by fat when any fat can be spared. Broth carries smoke and bone. Bread may be dense, unevenly baked, and still welcome because warmth itself is comforting. A hungry body is not fussy. It is grateful in simple, practical ways. The kitchen air makes hunger sharper. You smell onions hitting fat, herbs crushed between fingers, fish cleaned near the door, and bread catching on the edge between done and overdone. You hear the scrape of wooden spoons, the shifting of iron hooks, the bubble of pots, the sudden hiss when something spills into coals. Cooking is a daily performance of timing, fuel management, and improvisation. There is never quite enough of anything, except perhaps smoke. For Black Americans, food can also become a place where memory survives. Ingredients are shaped by colonial supply, yet technique, seasoning choices, and preferences may carry traces from African homelands or from contact among different labouring communities. A certain way of pounding grain, a fondness for one leafy green over another, a method of stewing that makes tough ingredients useful. The records rarely admire such continuity, but the pot remembers what the archive forgets. A curious detail of colonial life is that gardens often matter enormously, even when official power pretends they are minor. Small plots can provide beans, squash, herbs, greens, or roots that transform a poor ration into a survivable one. A few onions, a handful of peas, leaves cut fresh before supper. These things brighten both diet and spirit. To tend a garden is to claim a little relationship with the land that is not entirely defined by someone else's crop. The soil under your fingernails from a garden bed feels different from the soil of a master's field, even if no law acknowledges the difference. Water is another daily concern. It must be fetched, carried, stored, and guarded from filth as best one can. Wells are heavy work. Rivers are useful but not always clean. Buckets knock against legs and bruise shins. Water cools the hand on a hot day, then makes it ache in cold months. A spilled bucket can ruin a temper very quickly because it means the labour must be done again. The colony teaches that nothing essential comes without hauling. Historians still debate exactly how much food and material provision varied between households, regions, and seasons for black labourers in the mid-17th century. Records tend to show what owners thought they provided, which is not always what people actually received. Accounts may list rations or blankets in tidy terms, while lived experience includes shortfalls, substitutions, theft, weather damage, and simple neglect. Paper is often much better fed than people are. Weather decides much about shelter and comfort. Rain taps, then drums, then invades. Roofs leak into bowls placed strategically on the floor. Blankets feel heavier and colder once damp. Smoke clings lower in wet weather, flattening into the room. In summer, heat turns cabins into ovens by afternoon. Flies gather. Air sits still. Sweat never quite dries. In winter, every draught matters. Fingers stiffen. Breath appears faintly in the room. Coals become precious. Wood piles shrink with alarming speed, and yet beauty still appears. Morning light through gaps in the boards can stripe the floor in gold. A clean bowl catching firelight can seem almost elegant. Fresh-baked bread, however coarse, gives off a smell that softens everyone's face for a moment. A child wrapped in the only dry blanket may look suddenly peaceful. A shirt newly washed and stretched to dry in pale sun can flutter like a small act of hope. The colony is harsh, but people remain capable of noticing grace where they find it. You also learn that shelter is social, not just physical. A roof matters, but so does who shares the room, who offers a corner by the fire, who passes you the thicker spoonful, who saves a crust for later, who notices that your shoes are nearly gone and quietly suggests a scrap of leather. Material hardship can sharpen cruelty, but it can also encourage tenderness. These settlements survives through both labour and these small exchanges of care. For some free black households, where freedom can be claimed and defended at all, material life may be slightly more stable. A sturdier chest, a better cooking pot, a patch of land worked for one's own family, perhaps a hen or two, perhaps a blanket not borrowed from another need. Such comforts are modest by any grand standard, yet they can transform daily feeling. To sleep under your own roof, however humble, is not the same as sleeping under command. To eat from your own stores, even poorly, carries a dignity no ration can match. Still, nothing in the colony is secure for long. Fire can destroy a dwelling in an hour. Illness can empty a household. Debt can strip a family down to tools and memories. A master's death can reorganize possessions and people with horrifying speed. What you have in one season may be gone by the next. This is why objects matter so much, because there are so few, because each one was difficult to keep, because comfort, once lost, is not easily replaced. So life in food, cloth, and shelter is a lesson in endurance measured by the senses. It is the rough nap of linen on tired skin, the warm weight of a wooden bowl in chilled hands, the smell of cornmeal and wood smoke at dawn, the sting of cold air through wall cracks, the relief of dry straw, the ache of carrying water, the pleasure of a kettle that actually holds enough. These things seem ordinary only from a distance. Up close, they are the shape of survival itself, and in that shape every scrap counts. Love does not wait for good conditions. It appears anyway, which is deeply inconvenient for any society trying to treat human beings like movable equipment. In 1650, black Americans form attachments in a world that offers very little security and even less official respect. Yet affection persists. People choose one another, care for children, mourn relatives, and build kin ties that can outlast the paper arrangements of masters and courts. Family life is fragile. Yes, but fragile is not the same as weak. You feel that truth most clearly at evening. The day's work has finally loosened its grip a little. Firelight softens the room. Someone shifts a pot closer to the coals. A baby fusses, then settles against a warm shoulder. Low voices move through the dimness. The smell of stew, smoke, damp wool, and tired bodies fills the air. Outside, frogs start their patient music, and insects pulse in the dark. Inside, a woman smooths a child's hair back from a sweaty forehead. A man rubs his wrist after a day of labour and listens to someone speak. In such moments, family is not an abstract institution. It is a circle of attention. For black people in the English colonies, that circle is hard to protect. Marriage exists, but it is not always recognised in the same way for everyone. Church blessing may be possible in some places, ignored in others, or denied entirely. Neighbours may accept a couple as husband and wife, even when officials do not care to record it. A shared household, a sleeping place, a cooking fire, and the public understanding of a community can matter more than formal paperwork. The colony likes documents, but daily life often runs on witness and memory. People know who belongs to whom in the human sense, even when law refuses to honour it. That refusal is part of the cruelty. A relationship may be real, stable, and deeply valued, yet still remain vulnerable to interference by owners, employers, heirs, or local authorities. A couple might live together only because a master currently tolerates it. A widow may have to argue for the right to remain on a small piece of land with her children. A free black man may struggle to protect a wife or child whose status is less secure than his own. Family is shaped by affection, but also by legal danger constantly tapping at the door. Children sit at the centre of that danger. A child changes the rhythm of a household immediately. There is more washing, more carrying, more watching, more worry. You hear it in the different pitch of the room, a lullaby murmured near the fire, a soft cluck of reassurance, the quick intake of breath when a toddler wanders too close to boiling water or an open flame. Babies need wrapping, feeding, rocking, and endless patience. Older children need supervision, instruction, correction, and comfort. These are ordinary demands in any century. In 1650 they are made harder by the fact that adults are already exhausted and rarely control their own time fully. Still, children are cherished. That may sound obvious, but it matters to say it plainly. Black parents in early English America are not merely producing labour or filling a household. They are loving actual children with personalities, moods, talents, and fears. A mother notices which child startles easily at loud voices. A father knows which one asks too many risky questions. An older sister can calm a baby faster than anyone else. An aunt tells stories that make even grumpy little faces relax. Kinship is made from repeated care, and repeated care is happening all the time. Some families are formed by blood, others are formed by necessity. This is one of the most important social truths of the period. A colony full of dislocation forces people to widen the meaning of family. An older woman may become a grandmother to children who are not technically hers. A man from a nearby holding may be treated like an uncle because he brings help, news, and protection. A child separated from parents may be folded into another household through daily kindness. These relationships are not lesser because they are improvised. In difficult worlds, improvisation is often the purest form of loyalty. The atmosphere around child rearing is both tender and severe. There is affection, but there is also urgency. Children must learn quickly. They need to know where not to step, whom not to anger, when to stay quiet, and how to make themselves useful. A little girl might learn to mind a younger child while still scarcely steady herself. A little boy might carry wood, fetch water, or scare birds from a field before he has lost all the softness of early childhood. No one has the luxury of pretending innocence can last forever. Yet play survives because children are stubbornly alive. You may hear laughter outside at dusk, quick feet in dust, the thump of a homemade toy, a chant repeated in rhythm, or the delighted noise of a game invented from nothing more than a stick and open ground. Children can turn almost anything into amusement for a little while. A shell becomes treasure, a gourd becomes a drum, a scrap of cloth becomes a doll. This creativity is not trivial. It is a way of claiming joy from a world that offers it sparingly. The law, unfortunately, has no talent for tenderness. As the mid-17th century unfolds, colonial authorities become increasingly interested in fixing status through ancestry. This is especially significant for children. If the colony can decide that a child inherits the condition of a parent, then control becomes easier and more profitable. The details vary by place and time. But the trend is ominous. A child's future is no longer simply about baptism, service, or household custom. It is being tied more tightly to lineage and ownership. That development makes family life more anxious, not less. Historians still argue about how rapidly and uniformly these legal principles took hold across different English colonies. Some places hardened earlier, some relied longer on inconsistent customs. Some officials improvised before formal rules appeared. What seems certain is that families lived with uncertainty long before legal language became standardized. The fear arrived before the tidy wording did. People understood very well when the colony was turning children into inherited wealth. That knowledge changes parenthood. Imagine holding your child and knowing that love alone cannot shield them from the ambitions of other people. Imagine trying to teach dignity in a world that keeps pricing bodies. Imagine deciding which truths to say aloud. A parent must prepare a child without crushing the child's spirit entirely. That is a delicate and painful art. You teach caution, but not surrender. You teach silence in dangerous moments, but not self-contempt. You teach usefulness because usefulness may protect them. While praying, it does not teach them to measure their own worth only through labour. Women bear a heavy share of this emotional burden. Black women often sustain household life under conditions that exploit both their work and their fertility. They cook, mend, soothe, nurse, and organise, even when they are themselves under command. They carry family memory in everyday ways, the right way to wrap a child against chill, the words to say when someone is ill, the timing of a simple meal so everyone gets something warm, the signals of comfort that pass from one generation to another. These acts can look domestic and small to outsiders. They're actually the architecture of survival. Men's roles are complicated by the colony's hierarchy as well. A black father may love and guide his children deeply while having limited legal power to defend them. He may provide food, teach skills, offer protection, and model endurance, even if the law grants him no secure authority. Masculinity in this world is not measured by public power so much as by persistence, presence, and the ability to preserve a household's dignity under pressure. That is a harder task than colonial swagger, though much less celebrated in official records. One curious feature of early colonial family life is how much depended on reputation. In thin settlements, people know who works steadily, who keeps a household orderly, who honours a partnership, who mistreats dependents, and who might stand as a witness in a dispute. Reputation cannot solve structural injustice, but it can influence outcomes. A respected free black householder may gain a little room to defend his family. A known couple may receive community acknowledgement even without full legal sanction. A child known and named by neighbours is harder, though not impossible, to erase from memory. Loss remains close at hand. Illness can sweep through a settlement and empty a room of laughter almost overnight. Women die in childbirth. Infants fail to thrive. Fevers take the strong and spare the baffling. The colony is terribly casual about death because it sees too much of it. That does not mean families feel it lightly. Grief settles into the body like winter damp, a blanket folded and left unused, a cup with no hand reaching for it, a mother quiet at the fire, a man staring too long at the door. Mourning in such a world may have little ceremony, but it has depth. Burial practices vary, and the record is often incomplete, but care for the dead clearly matters. However limited the means, people try to mark passing with some dignity. A prayer spoken low, a body washed, a cloth arranged carefully, a grave chosen and remembered. The colony may reduce people in life, but the living still struggle to give the dead a place in memory. Memory itself becomes an inheritance, sometimes the only reliable one. And there are births too, of course. Birth changes the emotional weather of a household. Even in hardship, a new baby can draw smiles from tired faces. There is wonder in tiny hands, in the warmth of a sleeping infant, in the absurdly serious expressions babies wear as if contemplating theology. Women with experience gather around labouring mothers when they can. Advice is given. Water is heated. Cloths are prepared. The room smells of sweat, herbs, smoke, and fear. Childbirth is ordinary and dangerous at once, a fact the colony never lets anyone forget. Within these households, stories matter. They're told while mending, cooking, walking, or rocking a child half asleep. Some stories entertain, some instruct, some preserve fragments of places left behind, some explain kin relations so children know who they are connected to, even when the formal structure is shaky. Storytelling gives shape to belonging. It tells a child, you did not appear from nowhere. You are attached. You are known. That message is essential because the wider society says the opposite. It tries to define people by labour and status, not by relationships of care. Family quietly contradicts that definition every day. A mother saving the best morsel for a child, a father teaching a boy how to judge weather by the smell of the air, siblings sharing a blanket without complaint, an older woman correcting a child's manners because someone must. These are not sentimental decorations around history. They are history. So what is family life like for Black Americans in 1650? It is loving under strain. It is domestic tenderness surrounded by legal indifference. It is children cherished in a world eager to classify them. It is couples making vows with or without official permission. It is kin built through blood, choice, memory, and shared endurance. It is grief carried quietly and joy protected fiercely. It is the sound of lullabies under a leaking roof and the touch of a steady hand when everything else feels uncertain. The ground beneath such families is fragile, but the people standing on it are not. Night invites different thoughts than morning. In daylight, the colony asks what you can carry, cut, scrub, plant, or endure. After sunset, another set of questions rises more softly. What do you remember? What do you believe is still true about the world, despite everything done to you? What words do you say over a child, a sick friend, a body laid out for burial, or your own tired heart before sleep finally comes? In 1650, Black Americans live not only by labour and law, but by inner life. And inner life can be harder to seize than land. You feel it first in sound. The workday noises fade, hose and kettles go quiet, chickens settle. The last voices of the yard thin into murmurs. Then smaller sounds emerge, crackling coals, the scrape of a stool across a floorboard, a sigh from someone easing sore muscles into rest, a baby breathing in short, warm puffs. Somewhere outside, frogs call through the dark as steadily as if they have been hired for the task. In these quieter hours, belief does not need a church bell to announce itself. It lives in hums, whispers, repeated phrases, and careful silences. Faith in the English colonies can be a strange performance. The colonists speak often about salvation, providence, sin, and grace. They pray over meals, quote scripture, judge one another's morals, and insist that heaven is very interested in their behaviour, though heaven is given a generous amount of work to ignore. For black people, Christianity may be encountered through sermons, household worship, baptism, or forced attendance. Some hear real comfort in its promises. Some hear mainly the voice of power dressed in holy language. Many likely hear both at once. That tension shapes daily spiritual life. A minister may preach that all souls are equal before God, then return home to a world arranged very differently. A master may insist on prayers at table while withholding mercy in nearly every other setting. A black labourer might learn Bible stories and hold on to them with sincere conviction, especially the ones about bondage, deliverance, wandering, and divine judgment. There is a certain sharp logic in listening to stories of captivity and freedom while standing in a colony built on unfree labour. Scripture can comfort the oppressed and embarrass the powerful at the same time, yet spiritual life is not only borrowed from English churches. Many black Americans in 1650 are African-born or closely connected to African-born parents and elders. They carry memories, however fragmented, of religious worlds that did not begin with English Protestantism. Those memories might include reverence for ancestors, sacred uses of music and rhythm, beliefs about healing, forms of divination, ritual gestures, protective objects, or understandings of the unseen that do not fit neatly into colonial categories. The records are frustratingly thin because colonial authorities were much better at documenting taxes and punishments than the intimate life of belief. Still, traces remained. A gesture over a child, a whispered phrase before travel, a charm tucked away, a way of treating illness that combines herb, prayer, and touch. These things matter because they reveal that spiritual survival is rarely singular. People do not simply exchange one complete system for another in a tidy historical moment. They adapt, combine, conceal, reinterpret, and continue. A woman may know Christian prayers and still keep older understandings of protection near her heart. A man may attend worship in English fashion, yet trust dreams, signs, or ancestral presence in ways the minister would not fully appreciate. Human beings are capable of holding more than one map of the sacred. Memory is part of that sacred work. You sit near a fire and hear someone mention a place name that means little to English ears, but everything to the speaker. The word carries distance inside it. Perhaps it is the name of a river, a town, a people, a coastline, or a family line. Perhaps it comes out only rarely because pain follows close behind. Even when exact geographies fade, memories remains active through food habits, body techniques, songs, names, proverbs, and moral expectations. A child can inherit a world they have never seen through repeated details that nobody bothers to call philosophy, though that is exactly what it is. Smell helps memory cling. A certain leaf bruised in the hand, oil warming near a flame, fresh earth after rain, fish drying, wood smoke caught in cloth. Anyone who has ever been ambushed by a smell from childhood would understand. The nose is a ruthless archivist. In colonial America, where so much is stolen or broken, smell can still pull entire rooms of memory into the present. One familiar scent may restore a grandmother's courtyard, a shoreline market, a farming season, or a ceremony half forgotten by daylight but alive again at dusk. Music carries memory too. Not always grand music, not polished performance, often something smaller and more intimate. A humming line under the breath while stirring a pot, a rhythmic clap while soothing a child, a call and response pattern used in work, play, or mourning, a melody bent to fit new words. A Christian psalm may be sung with feeling shaped by very different traditions of rhythm and communal participation. Sound is portable. It crosses water better than furniture. It survives when official culture is trying not to notice. One quirky detail of early colonial life is how often English observers seem baffled by the cultural creativity around them. They might record that Africans sang differently, healed differently, mourned differently, or marked celebrations in ways that seemed unusual. The observers rarely grasp the depth of what they are witnessing. They see odd custom, they miss continuity, adaptation, and intellect. It is a familiar colonial habit, really. Notice the surface. Misunderstand the soul. Healing sits at the edge of faith and practical knowledge. In a world of disease, injury, childbirth, poor sanitation, and limited formal medicine, people rely on remedies passed hand to hand. Herbs are steeped, poultices are laid on hot skin, steam is inhaled, bitter infusions are swallowed with little enthusiasm. A woman may know which leaves reduce swelling, which root settles the stomach, which tea eases fever, or which touch calms panic. Some remedies come from African traditions, some from indigenous knowledge, some from English households, and many from mixtures impossible to separate neatly. Survival encourages intellectual generosity. When illness comes, spiritual care and bodily care often merge. A sick child may be held, cooled, prayed over, and fed broth in the same hour. A labourer with a deep cough may receive herbs along with spoken blessings. The room smells of damp cloth, warm skin, smoke, and whatever remedy has been brewing too long by the hearth. There is fear in that room, but also determination. Even when cure fails, care itself has meaning. To sit beside the ill through the night is to insist that their life is worth attention. Death sharpens these questions further. What happens to the soul who speaks for the dead? What rights can be managed in a place where time, space, and authority may all work against proper mourning? Black Americans in 1650 likely meet death with a combination of practices, some Christian, some African in memory, some improvised by local necessity. A body may be washed carefully, prayers may be spoken aloud or silently. The dead may be addressed with tenderness, fear, hope, or all three. Burial grounds may be humble, but humility does not mean indifference. Historians still argue over how much continuity of West and Central African religious practice can be documented this early in the English colonies, especially because sources are sparse and heavily filtered through hostile observers. Some scholars stress rupture and fragmentation, others emphasize the persistence of underlying cosmologies, ritual forms, and healing traditions, even when outward details changed. The debate is useful, but daily life likely contained both loss and survival together. Memory does not need perfect preservation to remain powerful. Prayer itself can be private or communal. You might hear formal English words learned from Scripture. You might hear a more spontaneous speaking to God, with directness born of necessity. You might hear no words at all, only the repeated rhythm of someone breathing slowly in the dark while shaping a plea inwardly. Prayer in hard conditions often becomes less polished and more honest. It asks for health, endurance, protection, justice, and another day. Lofty theology has its place, but so does asking simply to keep your child safe through the night. There are also moments of gathering that feel almost festive, though never entirely free from danger. A few people together after labour, a shared meal a little better than usual, someone beating time on a surface, someone else singing, a circle of conversation widening, laughter loosening tired faces. Such moments are not merely entertainment, they renew the spirit. They remind people that they're more than isolated workers attached to separate tasks. Community needs sound. It needs rhythm. It needs occasions, however modest, when the soul can stand upright. In those gatherings, stories return again. Stories of animals outsmarting the proud. Stories of clever people surviving fools with power. Stories of mischief, judgment, luck, and hidden reversals. Such tales can travel far across the Atlantic, changing shape as they go. They entertain children, amuse adults, and carry moral wisdom beneath the humour. The weak outwitting the strong is a theme with obvious appeal in a colonial society. One hardly needs a committee to explain why. Touch also plays a role in the life of meaning. A hand on a shoulder during grief, fingers braiding hair, arms around a frightened child, the cool press of water on a fevered forehead, the deliberate arrangement of clothing for burial, the sharing of bread from one hand to another. Touch can reassure when words feel inadequate. It can transmit belonging with almost no noise at all. In a society that uses force so casually, gentle touch becomes all the more important. You begin to understand that spiritual life is not separate from daily hardship. It grows inside hardship, twists around it, and sometimes makes hardship bearable. Belief is there in the kitchen and the sickbed, in the field and the graveyard, in the naming of children and the remembering of the dead. It lives in choices about food, songcast, care, gesture, and hope. The colony may define people by labour, but spiritual practice insists that a person also has depth, mystery, and worth that no ledger can contain. This is why memory matters so much. To remember is to refuse complete conquest. Even partial memory resists. A melody recalled imperfectly, a name preserved, a recipe adapted, a prayer blended from worlds, a warning passed down, a pattern sewn or tied or spoken. None of these alone can overthrow the colony. Together, they keep human interiority alive. They say that the past did not vanish just because someone profitable wished it would. By the time sleep comes, the coals are low and red. The room is warmer near the hearth, cooler by the walls. Someone shifts under a blanket. The air smells of soot, worn cloth, and the final traces of supper. Outside, darkness presses softly against the structure, full of unseen trees and damp ground. Inside, faith remains without needing spectacle. It rests in memory, in care, in whispered words, in music barely audible, in a belief that life contains more than what the powerful can measure. And sometimes that quiet belief is the strongest thing in the room. By 1650, no one in the English colonies lives entirely alone, however much they might dream of it after a long wet week. Fields touch paths, paths touch yards, and yards touch other people's tempers. You are always in relation to someone. A master, a mistress, a hired man, an indentured servant, a sailor, a trader, a minister, a neighbour, an indigenous guide, a child watching from a doorway, a woman listening while she pretends not to listen. For Black Americans, daily life is shaped not only by work and family, but by the constant pressure of other people deciding where you stand. You feel this most clearly in the yard. The yard is a social stage, though nobody would call it that while carrying slop buckets. Chickens scratch near the fence. A dog sleeps badly in the dust. Smoke lifts from the cooking fire in thin blue lines. Someone is splitting wood with short, hard blows. Someone else is wringing a cloth and muttering. Feet cross and recross the same patch of ground until the earth goes bare. Here, people watch one another without seeming to. You learn who is angry, who is anxious, who is in favour, who is in trouble, and who should not be approached before food. For black people in this world, relationships with white colonists are rarely simple. There is dependence, fear, negotiation, resentment, and sometimes a rough familiarity that can look almost friendly from a distance. That appearance is dangerous. A master who jokes with you may still sell you. A mistress who trusts your skill may still strike you with words or worse when she feels crossed. A neighbour who nods kindly on Sunday may refuse testimony on your behalf on Monday. Warmth can exist, but it does not cancel hierarchy. This is one of the hardest truths of colonial life. Intimacy and domination can live in the same household. You may know a family's habits better than some of its own relatives do. You know who snores, who lies, who hides sugar, who fears storms, who drinks too much, and which child steals crusts from the table. You may nurse their babies, tend their fevers, and help bury their dead. Yet that closeness does not mean equality. It often makes inequality more bitter because it is so personal. You are near enough to be known and still denied full regard. White indentured servants occupy an uneasy place in this social world. They often work under hard conditions and may feel the colony has cheated them, which is not exactly an original thought, but is frequently correct. Some form practical bonds with black workers through shared tasks. Cramped quarters, hunger, punishment, and mutual dislike of pompous superiors. A joke exchanged over a muddy ditch can make a real human connection. So can helping lift a barrel or covering for someone during a moment of exhaustion. Shared suffering has social force, but shared suffering has limits too. White servants can also cling fiercely to whatever status race gives them. Even when poor, beaten, and overworked, many still understand that the colony is beginning to reserve future advantages for people who look like them. That realization can poison solidarity before it fully forms. A white servant near the end of a term may look ahead to land, wages, marriage, militia duty, or political voice. A black labourer may be denied those same hopes entirely, or forced to fight much harder for each one. The colony is learning that one of the best ways to preserve hierarchy is to offer struggling white people just enough superiority to keep them invested. You hear this in language, a tone of command when no command is necessary, a joke that is not really a joke, a pause before using a title, a decision about who is called man, woman, boy, or girl. These choices do social work. They train everyone in the yard to understand rank. Children absorb it quickly. So do newcomers. Before formal law speaks, daily speech is often spoken already. Relationships with masters vary widely in style, and not nearly enough in power. Some owners are loud in their authority. They bark orders, count output obsessively, and take any delay as a personal insult. Others are colder and quieter, which is often worse because their calm gives them the appearance of reason, while they do unreasonable things very steadily. A few may show forms of reliance that almost resemble respect when they depend on a black worker's knowledge, especially in farming, healing, animal care, or household management. Yet dependence is not the same as justice. A man can value your competence deeply and still deny your humanity whenever it becomes inconvenient. Mistresses are part of this web as well. The domestic sphere is not a soft zone floating above power. It is one of power's favourite rooms. A mistress may rely on black women for cooking, laundering, nursing, cleaning, and intimate household labour while policing behaviour, dress, speech, and movement with relentless attention. She may be affectionate one hour and punishing the next. She may resent the dependence itself. Colonial households often run on emotional contradictions, and black women are frequently expected to absorb those contradictions without complaint. It is exhausting work, and not only in the physical sense. There are neighbours too, which means there is gossip, and gossip is one of the colony's most active industries. News travels over fences, along paths, in churchyards, at mill sites, near docks, and through kitchens. Who ran away? Who was whipped? Who may be free? Who is courting whom? Who owes money? Who quarrelled over land? Who was seen walking after dark? Reputation can rise or collapse in such talk. For black Americans, rumour can be especially dangerous because uncertain status invites public speculation. If people begin saying you are not as free as you claim, or that your child belongs to someone's estate, the words can harden into trouble. Still, neighbours can help as well. A woman lends a pot. A man shares seed. Someone passes along news of a court session, a death, a debt, a vacancy, a marriage, a ship arrival, in a scattered settlement. Information is survival. So is witness, knowing who saw what, who remembers a promise, who can testify to a term served, or who will say your child was born within a certain household can matter enormously. Social life is never trivial in a world where paperwork is thin and memory carries legal weight. Indigenous communities are also part of the colonial landscape, though English records often reduce them to threat, alliance, or trade convenience. Real contact is more varied. Black people in some colonies encounter Indigenous neighbours through labour, exchange, conflict, shared knowledge of terrain, or mutual observation. A person may learn food ways, plant knowledge, or travel routes indirectly through these relationships. Some communities meet through suspicion, others through practical cooperation, some through captivity and violence arranged by colonists who are perfectly willing to exploit differences among subordinated peoples. This makes the social world even more layered. You may be living in a colony where English settlers depend on the indigenous trade and land knowledge, while simultaneously pushing harder into indigenous territory. Black labour is part of that expansion. So black people can find themselves both oppressed by the English and entangled in English colonial projects affecting indigenous communities. There is no neat moral geometry available. People make choices under pressure, with incomplete knowledge, inside systems they did not design. That complexity does not excuse harm, but it does make the human landscape more honest, A curious detail from the period is how often colonial authorities panic when poor people across racial lines appear too friendly with one another. Shared drinking, shared complaints, shared escape plans, shared theft, or simply too much familiarity can alarm the people in charge. They recognize, sometimes more clearly than anyone else, that hierarchy becomes unstable when the wrong people stop seeing each other as natural enemies. The colony is always listening for that possibility, and usually trying to interrupt it. Historians still debate how much interracial cooperation among labouring people in the mid-17th century was common practice, occasional necessity, or later exaggerated by dramatic incidents. The sources are patchy, and officials often recorded such moments mainly when they seemed threatening. What is clear is that contact was constant. People worked, ate, cursed, slept, and suffered near one another. Some distance was imposed by rule. Some closeness was imposed by daily need. Human feeling grew in both directions. Religion shaped social relations too. Church can gather people into a common physical space while preserving strict hierarchy within it. A black worshipper may hear the same sermon as a white servant and still leave under very different social expectations. Conversion might slightly improve reputation in some settings. In others, it changes almost nothing. Christian fellowship in colonial language often sounds far more equal than colonial practice ever becomes. The smell of wet wool and damp wood in a crowded meeting space may be shared. The rites attached to the souls inside are not. Market exchange creates another kind of contact. At a landing, a storehouse, a wharf, or a town edge. You see how people depend on one another for tools, cloth, grain, livestock, labour, and credit. A free black person may try to bargain for goods, pay a debt, or sell produce. These interactions can offer room to manoeuvre. They can also expose a person to insult, cheating, or sudden questioning about status. Trade is social theatre with very practical consequences. Who gets fair measure? Who gets told to wait? Who is addressed directly? Who is ignored while standing right there? The colony reveals itself in such moments. The emotional weather of these relationships changes quickly. One day a household may seem calm. The next day inheritance news arrives, a crop fails, someone falls sick, a servant disappears, or a neighbouring dispute spills over, and all the social balances shift. Black people must become excellent readers of atmosphere, the set of a jaw, the pace of footsteps, a silence at table, the way a door closes. These signals matter because danger often announces itself in mood before action, and yet, even under pressure, people create genuine bonds. Friendship is possible, though never simple. A fellow labourer who shares food, a woman who helps at a birth, a man who speaks up when an accusation turns unfair, a neighbour who remembers your child's name. These ties may not dismantle the structure of colonial life, but they soften isolation and sometimes protect the vulnerable in concrete ways. Human beings are not only what the system wants them to be. Humour continues to move through the social world as well. Dry remarks about someone's vanity, quiet mimicry of an overseer's walk, a perfectly timed look passed across a yard when a master says something foolish with full confidence. Such moments restore proportion. They remind listeners that power can be feared without being admired. Sometimes the most subversive act available is to recognise nonsense when you hear it, and let one trusted person know you notice too. By evening, these relationships settle back into the ordinary closeness of colonial life. Doors shut, fires burn lower, the yard empties. Somewhere a couple argues in tired whispers. Somewhere else a child is being coaxed to sleep. Someone walks home with a borrowed tool on one shoulder. Someone returns a bowl. Someone carries news that will matter tomorrow. The settlement is held together by authority, labour, habit, coercion, mutual need, and the endless traffic of observation. It is a small world, but never a simple one. So what is life like among neighbours, masters, servants, and surrounding communities? It is watchful. It is crowded with unequal intimacy. It is full of bargains, slights, dependencies, suspicions, courtesies, and calculations. It is a place where a kind word may be sincere and still unsafe to trust too much. It is a place where social ties can protect you, expose you, or both in the same week. For Black Americans in 1650, every relationship carries weight because every relationship is shaped by a colony trying to decide who counts as fully belonging. And the answer, for many colonists, is given most clearly in how they behave when they think no one important is looking. Even in a hard world, people keep searching for a narrow door. In 1650, Black Americans do not live inside total uniformity. The colony would probably prefer that, for ease of accounting if nothing else. But reality remains messier. Some people are unfree for life, some are trapped in forms of service that slide towards slavery. Some are free already, though freedom is often thin and nervous. Some are trying, with immense caution, to move from dependence into a small but meaningful independence. These efforts are not common enough to make the world kind. They are important because they reveal that the boundaries are still being contested. You begin with the idea of freedom itself. It is not a trumpet blast. It is not a dramatic scene with swelling music and a polished speech. More often, it arrives in paper, witness, and persistence. A term of service may end. A master may manumit a labourer by choice, debt, promise, religious conviction, or sheer convenience. A widow may honour the intentions of a dead husband, though just as often she may not. A person may win a claim in court after years of uncertainty. Freedom, where it appears, is usually partial, vulnerable, and wrapped in conditions. Even so, it changes the air around a person. A free black man walking on his own errand carries himself differently from a man sent out under command. A free woman arranging her own cooking pot, however humble, stands in a different relation to the day. The difference is not always visible to strangers, which is part of the problem. Freedom must often be defended repeatedly because other people question it, ignore it, or conveniently forget it when labour is needed. Still, the feeling matters. To wake under your own roof, or even under a roof not controlled by a master, is to experience the morning with a different kind of tension. There is still fear. There is also ownership of your next step. Manumission can happen in several ways, though none are simple. Some black people receive freedom after a recognised term of service. Others are freed through a will. Others may purchase liberty, directly or indirectly, by wages, negotiated labour, or arrangements with owners. Such cases are fragile because they depend on records, good faith, and the willingness of local authorities to treat a black person's claim as valid. That is a rather large amount of faith to place in a colony. But people place it anyway because the alternative is surrender. Paper becomes precious. A scrap-proving service completed, a certificate of freedom, a record of baptism tied, perhaps, to an argument about status, a deed, a marriage entry, a witness statement. These documents are easily damaged, lost, denied, or dismissed. Yet they can mean the difference between living as a recognized person and being absorbed into someone else's estate. You can almost feel the careful way such papers are folded, wrapped, stored, and produced when challenged. They may be read aloud in rooms that smell of ink, leather, damp wool, and impatience. A life can hang on the legibility of a few lines. Some free black people acquire land, and that changes daily life in powerful ways. Land in the colonies is not merely property, it is food, shelter, standing, inheritance, bargaining power, and proof that one's labour can support one's own household rather than only another's wealth. A small plot may contain a cabin, a garden, perhaps a pig or a cow, and enough ground to produce something saleable or edible. The soil under your hands feels different when the harvest might belong to your children. The work remains hard, but its meaning changes. Landholding is never secure in an absolute sense. Boundaries are disputed, debts press, powerful neighbours expand, records are imperfect. Yet even insecure land offers a measure of rootedness. A person can plant fruit trees knowing they may take years to bear. A fence can be repaired for one's own benefit. A child can be told that this path, this corner, this patch of greens belongs to the household. Such statements are modest. But in a world eager to reduce black life to labour for others, modest possession carries moral weight. Women pursue freedom too, though often through even narrower openings. A black woman may secure freedom through service completed, through the death of an owner, through a negotiated arrangement, or through marriage into a somewhat more stable household. Once free, she may wash for wages, sell produce, hire out labour, keep lodgers, or manage a small domestic economy with fierce efficiency. The labour remains constant, but the control over it can shift. That shift matters deeply, especially where children are concerned. To control one's own household work, however imperfectly, is very different from carrying it out under direct command. Children complicate all such efforts because the status of a parent does not always guarantee the status of a child in ways that feel morally sane. Families therefore watch local custom closely. They listen for court decisions. They remember precedents. They seek witnesses. They ask who has been recognised as free and under what terms. Freedom is not a possession once gained and safely stored away. It is a condition that must be narrated, defended, and proved in a society that prefers convenient ambiguity. This is where courts become strangely important. No one dreams of a colonial courtroom for pleasure. The room is usually uncomfortable, crowded, and full of men who believe they are the first people ever to understand seriousness. It smells of paper, damp clothes, boots, and stale air. Yet it can also become a place where black people assert claims with real determination. A completed term, a promised freedom, unpaid wages, a disputed inheritance, a boundary, a child's status. These cases do not always end well, and the very need to bring them reveals how unsafe freedom is. But the act of petitioning matters. It shows that black colonists are not simply enduring law, they are engaging it, testing it, and sometimes forcing it to answer. A quirky truth of the period is that local memory can matter almost as much as formal statute. In a thinly settled colony, the question may not be only what the law says, but who remembers your arrival? Who heard your master's promise? Who knows your marriage is real? Who saw you working for wages? And who can speak on your behalf? Reputation becomes a kind of informal currency. A steady householder, a skilled worker, or a known family man may find slightly more support than a stranger, though support is never guaranteed. It is a small and uncertain advantage, yet people cultivate it carefully. Work for wages appears in these openings as well. A free black person may hire out labour seasonally, take on specialised tasks, or exchange skills for goods and money. The arrangements are often temporary and unequal, but they can provide room to accumulate tools, clothing, seed, livestock, or perhaps enough savings to secure a better footing. Skill matters greatly here. A person known for carpentry, animal handling, curing tobacco, ferry work, laundering, midwifery, or cooking can become economically useful in ways that owners, neighbours, and employers cannot ignore. Usefulness, however, is a double-edged gift. It can create opportunity because people need what you can do. It can also make others feel entitled to your labour indefinitely. A skilled black worker may be praised one day and challenged the next, when praise begins to resemble recognition too closely. The colony likes competence best when competence remains humble, profitable, and politically quiet. Once it begins to support independence, confidence, or property claims, admiration grows noticeably cooler. Religious standing sometimes helps. Baptism, church membership, or a reputation for Christian behaviour can strengthen a person's place in the eyes of some authorities. It does not erase racial hierarchy, not even slightly, but it may provide another thread in a net of legitimacy. A free black person who can present as orderly, married, church-going, industrious, and respectable gathers whatever social armour is available. The armour is thin, still. Thin armour is better than none when the blows keep coming. Historians still argue over how exceptional these free black households and landholders were by mid-century, and how much their relative success depended on local conditions that would soon narrow. Some scholars emphasise the real presence of a small free black population with property and legal standing in certain colonies. Others stress how precarious and limited those gains always were. Both views can be true at once. The openings existed, and they were fragile from the start. The emotional atmosphere of precarious freedom is distinctive. It is not the relaxed feeling of safety. It is alertness mixed with pride. You listen closely when people discuss law, inheritance, and rumour. You keep documents dry. You cultivate witnesses. You avoid unnecessary quarrels with powerful neighbours, though perhaps not every quarrel, because dignity has its own appetite. You repair the fence, plant the onions, tend the fire, count the hens, mark the seasons. Ordinary household acts become a declaration that your life has structure beyond service. For some, mobility becomes part of this search. A person may move from one county to another, from one colony to another, seeking better conditions, clearer recognition, or simply distance from those who once claimed authority. Travel is risky, but so is remaining where your freedom is disputed. Roads are rough, ferries uncertain, and strangers curious. Still, movement offers possibility. A new place may bring a new employer, a new church, a new set of neighbours, or a less hostile court. Colonial geography is not neutral. It can constrict, but it can also provide escape routes. Community support remains essential. A free black household rarely thrives by isolation alone. Kin, friends, fellow labourers, sympathetic neighbours, and marriage ties can all strengthen survival. One person lends seed, another helps raise a wall. Someone watches children during harvest. Someone carries news from court or market. Freedom, in practice, is often communal maintenance. It requires social backing because the colony is always prepared to let isolated people slip backward. There is also the matter of self-presentation, clothing mended neatly, a house kept orderly, children taught manners, tools maintained, debts remembered. Such details are not shallow in this context. They help announce that a household deserves recognition. That may sound unfair, and it is. People under pressure often have to perform respectability with exhausting care, simply to receive what others get by default. Yet many black colonists do it because practical life requires every available strategy. Even then, danger remains close. A white neighbour may resent black land ownership. An heir may contest a will. A clerk may misrecord a status. A widow may remarry, and her new husband may take a harsher view of old arrangements. A poor harvest may force borrowing. A sick child may consume savings. Liberty in 1650 is not a broad road. It is a narrow path through mud, with ditches on both sides and plenty of people hoping you slip. Yet some do keep walking. That matters enormously, not because their stories cancel the larger structure of oppression, but because they show that black life in mid-century English America includes initiative, legal strategy, household building, economic planning, and social intelligence on a high level. People are not merely acted upon, they act. They assess risk, gather evidence, form alliances, use institutions, and pursue openings wherever they appear. This does not make the colony generous. It makes black endurance and judgment all the more impressive. So what do these paths toward limited freedom actually look like? They look like folded papers and careful witnesses. They look like a garden that feeds your own children. They look like wages counted twice. They look like a woman selling produce or taking in washing on her own account. They look like a man standing in court and insisting that a promise be honoured. They look like land measured, fences mended, marriages defended, and names entered into records that might outlive the people who doubted them. The freedom is narrow, the courage is not. By 1650, the colony is getting ideas, and unfortunately they are the kind of ideas that arrive wearing boots and carrying ink. Customs that were once vague begin to stiffen. Habits turn into rules. Assumptions become procedures. Men who enjoy power start writing down the arrangements that suit them best, which is rarely a promising sign for anyone else. For Black Americans, this means something chilling in daily life. The uncertainty is still there, but it no longer feels loose and accidental. It begins to feel organised. You notice the change first in conversation. People speak more confidently about who belongs where. A planter who once treated black labour as one rough category among several now talks as if lifelong servitude were the natural order of things. A clerk reaches for familiar phrases when entering names and conditions. A neighbour repeats what he claims the law says, even when he only half understands it, because half understanding can still do plenty of damage. The colony is teaching itself to sound certain. That performance matters. Rules often harden in speech before they harden in statute. The air in official places feels different from the yard or the field. A courthouse, meeting room, or clerk's office carries the smell of paper, wax, leather, damp coats, and stale authority. Boots scrape on wooden floors, benches creak. Someone clears his throat with the seriousness of a man who believes history has been waiting specifically for him to begin talking. Here, categories are sharpened. Servant, slave, Christian, Negro, property, heir, child. The words are not neutral. They are tools being fitted to human bodies. One of the most dangerous developments of the period is the growing effort to make black status inheritable and predictable from the perspective of owners. A labour system based on temporary service leaves room for exploration, argument, and inconvenient liberty. A labour system based on birth is far more attractive to people thinking about profit over generations. If the status of a child can be fixed by lineage, then wealth becomes self-reproducing. It is a cold calculation, but a very effective one. The colony begins leaning harder in that direction. You can feel the result inside families. Pregnancy now carries not only the usual fears of childbirth, illness, and survival, but also increasing anxiety about what the colony will say a child is. A baby is held, named, fed, and loved, yet also watched by a legal imagination that wants to convert kinship into ownership. The room where a mother nurses her child still smells of warm milk, linen, smoke, and tired skin. Nothing about the tenderness is changed. What changes is the pressure surrounding it. The law is beginning to hover in the cradle. Punishment changes too, where status is becoming more fixed. Discipline becomes more severe and more unequal. Colonial authorities grow increasingly willing to treat black people as subject to harsher correction, longer service, and fewer routes of redress than white servants. The exact practice varies, but the trend is clear enough in daily life. You see it in how quickly mercy runs out. You hear it in the casual tone of men discussing years added, terms extended, bodies controlled. The colony is not only exploiting labour, it is training itself to believe that different kinds of labourers deserve fundamentally different fates. This distinction is useful to the powerful in more ways than one. It helps separate poor whites from black workers more firmly. A white servant may still be beaten, overworked, cheated, and insulted, but he can increasingly be invited to imagine that at least he is not permanently placed in the lowest category. That invitation is politically valuable. It costs the elite little and buys them social distance between groups that might otherwise find common cause. Division becomes one of the colony's smartest investments. The legal changes do not always arrive in one dramatic burst. Sometimes they creep. A court decision here, a local custom there, a clarified inheritance practice, a punishment rule, a baptism that no longer complicates ownership the way some once hoped it might. This piecemeal hardening can make the shift feel oddly quiet while you're living through it. No trumpet announces that a door has been closed forever. You simply notice, one season at a time, that fewer people are getting through. A strange and unsettling feature of this process is how ordinary it can seem on the surface. A man enters a record, a widow settles an estate, a child's status is discussed, a labour dispute is resolved in a way that reveals more than it first appears to. Paper moves from hand to hand, ink dries, men nod. Outside, chickens still scratch in the yard and soup still simmers by the fire. History often looks terribly domestic while it is becoming dangerous. Historians still debate the pace and regional unevenness of this tightening. Some colonies formalized hereditary racial slavery earlier and more decisively than others. Some relied longer on local precedent, personal arrangement, or inconsistent custom. Yet by the middle of the century, the larger direction is visible. English America is moving toward a system in which blackness is increasingly tied to permanent unfreedom. The exact wording may differ from place to place. The pressure does not. Religion offers less shelter than some might hope. Earlier uncertainties about baptism and slavery begin to narrow. Colonists become more comfortable arguing that Christian status does not free a black person from bondage. This matters greatly because it closes one of the moral cracks in the structure. If baptism had implied stronger claims to equal standing, then enslaving fellow Christians would have looked awkward in ways even the colony might struggle to ignore. Better, from the planter's point of view, to keep the sacrament and remove the consequences. That is a very colonial move. Keep the piety, lose the obligation. For black people, this means that participation in Christian life may still offer comfort, community, or moral language, but it offers less legal leverage than some may once have imagined. A baptized person can pray, worship, and still be treated as property. The contradiction is glaring, yet the colony learns to stare straight through it. Repetition helps. Profit helps more. You see the tightening in labour expectations too. A black worker is increasingly assumed to be available not merely for present tasks, but as a permanent asset to a household or estate. Children are viewed with an eye toward future productivity. Women's childbearing becomes entangled with labour calculation. Men's physical strength is measured in terms of long duration rather than negotiated service. The body is read as capital. This is one of the darkest developments because it reaches into the future and claims it in advance. The social atmosphere grows sharper as these ideas spread. Neighbours who might once have described a black person as a servant begin speaking more bluntly of ownership. Challenges to status are made more aggressively. A free black household may face greater suspicion because its existence now contradicts the direction in which the colony is heading. The very presence of an independent black family can irritate people committed to harder lines. Resentment follows visibility. A curious detail of legal cultures in this era is how often broad transformations depend on local men with uneven competence. One county court may be harsher than another. One clerk may record status carefully. Another may be sloppy enough to create years of trouble. One magistrate may honour precedent selectively. Another may barely understand it. Enormous human consequences can hang on the mood, memory, or literacy of men in wool coats sitting at a table. The Empire likes to imagine law as majestic. Daily life often experiences it as improvised and frighteningly personal. This uncertainty does not make the trend less real. In fact, it can make it worse. When a system is tightening but not yet fully uniform, vulnerable people must navigate both formal hostility and local inconsistency. A person may win recognition in one jurisdiction and lose it in another. A promise honoured under one owner may be ignored by the next. A child's status may become the subject of dispute precisely because the law is moving toward harder answers while still leaving room for argument. That room rarely benefits the powerless for long. Resistance continues, of course, though it must adapt. Open challenge can become riskier as rules harden. People turn to quieter strategies, preserving papers, gathering witnesses, building networks of support, managing reputation carefully, choosing when to speak and when silence is the better shield. Some run, some petition, some negotiate, some endure and wait for moments when the system contradicts itself. Tightening law does not remove agency. It changes the cost of using it. At the same time, the colony is learning to imagine blackness itself as a legal shorthand for subordination. That shift is profound. Earlier ambiguity at least left conceptual room for multiple statuses, however unequally applied. As the law and custom narrow, race and bondage begin to fuse more tightly in the colonial mind. This fusion is not total everywhere by 1650, but it is advancing. Once people start thinking this way, every encounter changes. A glance, a dispute, a birth, a sale, a marriage, a prayer, a debt, a punishment. All are interpreted through a harder lens. The emotional burden of the shift is heavy. Imagine sensing that the world around you is becoming less negotiable year by year. Imagine noticing that arguments which might once have found some hearing now meet colder faces. Imagine teaching your children caution with greater urgency because the colony is writing a future for them without consent. The smell of supper, the comfort of a blanket, the ordinary touch of family life will remain. They now exist under a darker sky, and yet clarity has its own harsh gift. As the lines harden, the nature of the threat becomes easier to see. The colony is no longer merely confused, it is choosing. That matters historically and morally. It tells you that what is happening is not an accidental drift of custom alone. It is deliberate arrangement of power, profit, and inherited inequality. Men are building it. Men could choose otherwise. They usually do not. By evening, official language retreats from the day's work, but its effects remain everywhere. A mother settles her child knowing the colony may claim that child more aggressively than before. A father checks the place where important papers are hidden. A free household counts its goods and wonders how secure any of them are. A bound labourer listens to white servants talk about their futures and hears the difference widening. Outside, the night smells of damp earth and wood smoke. Inside, people continue their lives while the law creeps closer. So what does it mean that the laws tighten in the night? It means the space between servitude and slavery is narrowing. It means custom is becoming policy. It means race is being made into destiny by people with pens, fields, and courts. It means the colony is moving from opportunistic exploitation toward a more deliberate structure of hereditary bondage. For Black Americans in 1650, daily life is still lived in ordinary acts of work, love, prayer, hunger, and rest. But above those acts, the legal sky is changing, and once the sky darkens enough, everyone beneath it feels the weather. You stand in a world that has not finished choosing its final shape, though its intentions are becoming easier to read. In 1650, Black Americans lived between two futures. One future still contains narrow openings, awkward ambiguities, and fragile claims that can sometimes be defended. The other future is colder, harder, and more organized, built to make black life permanently available for profit. People living in this moment do not know every detail of what is coming. They do know enough to feel the air changing. That knowledge settles into the body like a storm sensed before the clouds fully gather. The day still begins as all days do, with ordinary needs. Fire must be coaxed back to life. Water must be lifted. Children must be fed. Clothing must be shaken out, tied, adjusted, and put to use again. A hoe handle waits where it was left. A kettle hangs ready. Mud grips the yard after rain. Smoke rises in a blue thread through the cool morning. The world remains material, immediate, and demanding. Yet beneath these familiar gestures lies a deeper tension. Many black people are living in a colony that has not completely closed every door, while also recognizing that those doors are swinging inward with alarming speed. That is what makes 1650 such a striking year to inhabit. You're not standing in a world of pure fluidity, where status is genuinely open and race has no force. That world does not exist here. You're also not yet standing in the fully codified plantation regime that later centuries will know so well. Instead, you live in the uneasy middle, where a person might see examples of black landholding, wages, court petitions, family formation, religious belonging, and property claims, while also seeing stronger efforts to crush those same possibilities. Hope is present, but it is forced to live next door to evidence. Evidence is everywhere. A free black householder plants seed on his own ground and still keeps documents hidden carefully from damp and theft. A woman raises children within a household that holds together through discipline and love, while knowing that local custom might one day reinterpret their place. A labourer hears of someone winning freedom in court and also hears of others losing claims because paper failed. Witnesses died, or authority simply turned harder. These are not contradictions in separate worlds. They are contradictions in the same county, sometimes in the same week. This produces a particular emotional climate. It is not simple despair. Despair would almost be cleaner. It is vigilance mixed with effort. You keep going because life requires it, but you also study the behaviour of the colony around you. You notice which neighbours are more hostile now. You listen to the language used by clerks, planters, and ministers. You observe whether free black people are being tolerated, challenged, or quietly squeezed. You watch which white servants expect futures of their own, and which ones are being encouraged to identify upward rather than outward. In such a world, awareness is part of survival. The senses keep recording everything: the smell of tobacco leaf drying in a shed, the scratch of linen at the neck, the taste of salt fish and cornmeal after a long day, the ache in the lower back when evening finally comes, the warmth of a child asleep against your shoulder, the hollow knock of a bucket set down too hard by the well. History is moving through legal custom and economic desire. Yes, but it is also moving through bodies. Black Americans do not experience this turning point as a textbook concept. They feel it in how people look at them, talk around them, price their labour, count their children, and imagine their future. One reason this moment matters so much is that it reveals the colony before it fully hides behind inevitability. Later generations often speak as if racial slavery in English America simply appeared because that is how things were bound to develop. In 1650, the seams are still visible. You can see the choices being made. Colonists could have expanded limited freedoms, recognised service terms consistently, protected families more firmly, or refused to tie ancestry so tightly to bondage. Instead, many choose profit, control, and inherited inequality. The system is not a law of nature. It is a human construction taking shape in plain sight. That makes daily resilience even more impressive. People still marry, still pray, still plant gardens, still bury their dead with care, still teach children manners, caution, and memory, still share food when food is short, still laugh at foolishness, still search for witnesses, still mend walls, patch sleeves, save seed, and mark seasons. These are not tiny acts. They are the means by which life remains human inside structures trying to make it merely useful. The future may be closing, but people keep furnishing the present with dignity. A peculiar truth of this in-between world is that uncertainty can both harm and help. It harms because insecurity is exhausting. No one rests easily when status depends on custom, rumour, and the moods of powerful men. Yet uncertainty can also leave slivers of possibility. A freedom claim may succeed because local precedent has not fully hardened. A small black household may survive because the neighbourhood still accepts what later law would challenge more aggressively. A person may accumulate goods, land, or reputation during a period when the boundaries are ugly but not fully sealed. These openings are narrow, Even so, people use them. This means the black experience of 1650 cannot be told honestly as only doom or only opportunity. It is both constrained and improvisational. A person may know terror and pride in the same season. A family may celebrate a birth while fearing what the law will say about that child. A worker may be praised for exceptional skill while also realizing that skill makes others more eager to control them permanently. A free person may walk with authority through one errand and face open suspicion during the next. Such doubleness is not a side note, it is the central feeling of the age. Historians still debate how representative the more visible free black households, property holders, and legal petitioners were across the English colonies at mid-century. Some stress that these cases show genuine fluidity, however limited. Others warn against mistaking rare exceptions for broad security. The debate matters, but the lived truth may be simpler and harder. Even rare examples matter intensely to people who are searching for proof that a different life is possible. One family holding land, one successful petition, one acknowledged marriage can become social knowledge. It tells others that the wall is real, but not yet seamless. That social knowledge travels by voice more than paper. At a well, by a wharf, near a field edge, in a kitchen doorway, by firelight after the day's labour. People exchange what they know, who gained freedom, who lost a case. Which county court is harsher? Which minister is less hostile? Which planter ignores old promises? Which widow may honour them? Which place has room for a hired worker? Which road is safer? Which neighbour remembers the fact correctly? These conversations create an unofficial map of possibility. It is not reliable in every detail, but it helps people navigate a world where official systems rarely act in their favour, and still, the darker future keeps pressing in. You hear it when children are discussed less as souls than as future labour. You hear it when baptism no longer troubles ownership. You hear it when white poverty is offered racial comfort instead of shared justice. You hear it when black women's childbearing is folded into economic calculation. You hear it when a man speaks of a person and an ox in nearly the same accounting tone. The colony is showing its hand more clearly. It wants permanence. It wants inheritance. It wants a labour force bound so tightly that legal argument becomes harder and harder to imagine. This knowledge must have altered even quiet moments. Imagine a man sitting at his own threshold in the evening, feeling pride in his cabin, his tools, perhaps his small field, while also sensing that people around him find this independence increasingly offensive. Imagine a woman braiding a child's hair and wondering whether the colony's next turn will make that child's future narrower than her own. Imagine a couple lying awake after the fire has gone low, speaking softly about rumour, law, and land while trying not to wake those sleeping beside them. History often enters households this way, not as a public speech, but as private concern carried into the night. Yet there is something powerful about living before a structure becomes total. People in such moments can still remember alternatives. They can still say that things were not always exactly like this. They can still point to cases, households, customs, and negotiations that prove the present arrangement is being built rather than merely inherited from eternity. Memory of alternatives is politically important, even when those alternatives were themselves imperfect. It keeps the imagination from surrendering completely. A curious detail of human communities is that they often preserve hope in very plain objects. A deed wrapped in cloth, a Bible with names written inside, a cooking pot passed through a family, a child's garment saved after growth, a handful of seed reserved for the next season. These things do not look grand. They quietly insist on continuity. They tell you that someone expects life to go on, that someone intends a tomorrow, that someone believes a household deserves duration. In a colonial world leaning toward inherited bondage, such expectation has a brave quality. So what does it mean to live between freedom and slavery? It means the categories are already unequal, but not yet fully settled. It means some people can still climb into narrow spaces of independence, while many others are pushed downward. It means law, Religion, labour, and family are all being reorganised around race with increasing force. It means daily life contains both evidence of what might have been and warning of what is coming. It means black Americans in 1650 are not standing outside history's machinery. They are inside it, feeling the gears engage, and yet they remain more than what the machinery intends. That is the fact the colony never fully defeats. Black men and women continue to act as parents, spouses, neighbours, workers, believers, healers, witnesses, gardeners, sailors, cooks, labourers, and thinkers. They form judgments about character. They make strategies. They preserve names. They adapt memory. They create forms of care that outlast individual masters and local rules. Even when the future is narrowing, their lives are not reducible to the narrowing alone. Human richness persists under pressure with astonishing stubbornness. Now the night deepens. The fire settles into a softer red. Outside, the darkness lies over the fields and paths like a blanket pulled carefully across the land. The day's sharp noises have faded. A child shifts in sleep. Someone exhales slowly. The cabin smells of smoke, worn linen, and the faint lingering comfort of supper. Beyond the walls, the colony continues its restless counting of labour, land, and inheritance. But inside this small circle of warmth, another kind of accounting remains. Who is loved? Who is remembered? Who is missing? Who is being protected as best one can? You let the room grow quieter. The air cools gently near the floor, while the last warmth lingers higher up, around the fading firelight. Thoughts that seemed hard and urgent in daylight begin to soften at the edges. The people of this world cannot know everything that later generations will know. They cannot see every law, every sail, every field, every grief that will follow. They only have their own present, with its labour, hunger, tenderness, fear, and endurance. And that present is enough to ask for your attention. So you stay with them a little longer, with the mother settling her child beneath a coarse blanket, with the father checking once more that the paper is dry and hidden, with the woman who remembers a prayer from far away and whispers it almost soundlessly, with the man whose hands ache from work done for others and yet still plant seeds for his own small hope, with the child who sleeps, not knowing that history is already leaning close. The night outside is broad and patient. The trees stand in darkness. The paths are still. The smoke thins. The coals dim. And in that hush, you can feel the truth of this moment resting over everything. Life here is constrained, but not empty, threatened, but not erased, narrowed, but still alive with feeling, memory, and will. These people are living in the space between what remains possible and what is being taken away. They do not live as symbols, they live as human beings, and that is what makes their world so moving and so heavy to behold. Now let the scene grow softer. Let the rough boards, the cooling hearth, the folded cloth, and the sleeping child blur gently in the dark. Let the voices fade into the kind of silence that does not feel lonely, only distant and calm. Let the questions rest for a while. Let the night hold what the day could not resolve. And as the last warmth settles into quiet, you drift away from the colony's restless edges and into stillness, carrying only the simplest truth with you. They were here. They endured. They dreamed. And they remained fully human through it all.